intriguing question, particularly in light of the weather forecast for this day. He asks, what if we lived in a world where Christmas didn't come on December 25th, but rather with the first snowfall of the year? Think about that. Instead of a fixed date on the calendar that we could always be ready for, even though some of us, even with that, are not always ready. Instead of that, Christmas would be celebrated at just about any time after, well, in a climate like ours, any time after mid-October. And we would not have a clue other than just simply, well, it's the time of year when snow happens, of exactly when Christmas was coming. The people who lived in that sort of world could not count on a fixed number of shopping days before Christmas. And therefore, they would have to do their shopping early, which for a procrastinator like me, I don't know whether it would work very well. And of course, that would mean they would also have to have their presents not only bought, but also wrapped well before the first flakes fell. None of this Christmas Eve wrapping that I know my wife and I all too often get involved in. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. You know, those things that assembly is required, and you sort of forget about the fact that you need to assemble them, and then at about 1 o'clock on Christmas morning, you're assembling those gifts that you want to have ready. And of course, us procrastinators would be at a loss with this loss of a definitive deadline. For the rest of us, the moment of the first chilly night took place would be the signal that it was time to be ready for Christmas, which could come at any time from now on. Christmas could come today, the signs in the stores would say, and advertisements would blare, don't let Christmas catch you unprepared. And think about children. If this was the way that Christmas were to be set up, Christmas would certainly be different for children. Each cold and windy day would be a time of great excitement. And from the middle of October on, they would rise each morning and rush to look out the window, hoping to see their yard covered with a blanket of snowy white. At the breakfast table, children would ask their parents, do you think it might come today? Do you think it might come tomorrow? Over and over again every morning. Children would gather around television sets at news time because the weather report would be the most important time of the day for them. They would be waiting to see that the weather announcer would be showing up with their Santa hat on and saying, oh, it looks like it might be. They celebrated Christmas in Denver, Colorado a couple days ago, and we think it's coming here. Be ready. And then they'd get all excited. And how would you be able to sleep after that? And of course, this would happen several times in this season. How would you be able to sleep? I'm sure the kids would get up and every few hours and go to the window and see if they could see in the light of the street lamps some flakes coming down, and they'd go back to sleep disappointed, and then they'd wake up in the morning and they'd run to see the outside and be again disappointed with it. There's nothing but that same old brown sod on the lawn. Oh, but when the flakes finally began to fall, what incredible excitement. Children would jump up and down. They would join hands, even if they were just fighting with each other just a few minutes ago. They would join hands and they would jump and down and go around in a circle and say, it's here, it's here, Christmas is here, finally. And the parents would be relieved that at long last Christmas had finally come. It would be strange, wouldn't it, to live in a world like that? He's so different from the scheduled and predictable way that Christmas comes to us now, but it would be much more like that unscheduled first Christmas, wouldn't it? And almost exactly like the unscheduled second coming of Christ. But about that day, about that hour, no one knows, neither the angels of heaven nor the Son, but only the Father, Jesus tells us. I think the closest thing that many of us have ever had to deal with that is anything like this is waiting for a baby to come. You know the baby's coming, just like we know Jesus is coming, but you just don't really know exactly when. Because in case you haven't already experienced this, babies don't keep a schedule. That due date doesn't mean anything to them. Some come early, amen. Some come late. Some actually surprise us by actually being born on their due date, amen. Must have been like that for Joseph and Mary all those years ago. Wendy and I can remember that it was that way with our firstborn, Emily. The doctors played a trick on us with our second child. He was born on a scheduled cesarean, so we actually did know. But for Emily, she came the old-fashioned way, on her own schedule. I want to read from the journal of another pastor whose wife was about to give birth to a child in the middle of December. And he writes in his journal, December 17th, 1990. There is much to be done, not the least of which is keeping up the morale. 10 days past the due date, and we still haven't had a baby. Every night I lay out a change of clothes, thinking, this will be the night. And every morning I swallow my disappointment and put on those same clothes. I know the baby will come, but I don't know when. Living in a state of constant readiness is difficult. Learning that in the season of Advent seems oddly appropriate, but not especially comforting. Is this how we are supposed to wait for the second coming of Christ? With clothes laid out beside the bed and calluses on our knees? Probably so. Even so, come, Lord Jesus. And come, little Catherine. We have been waiting for you for so long. And we can't wait to hold you in our arms and fall in love with your sweet face. Could it be today? He goes on to say that it was not today, but the next day, when he and his wife finally welcomed Catherine into the world. The point is, though, there are things in life that God, in God's wisdom, does not let us program. And that means that even though we might know that an event is coming, that doesn't necessarily mean that we are actually prepared for it once it happens. Try as we might, there are things that can sneak up on us. Like the birth of a child. Like the first snow in winter. Like a thief in the night. The coming of Christ certainly caught his mother Mary in a strange town, miles away from the comforts of home and the help of the familiar loved ones and midwives. I can imagine her groaning when that first pang of birth, impending birth came upon her. Not now. Not here. She knew she was pregnant. She knew that her child was soon to arrive, but had she known the exact time of her child's arrival, we can imagine that she might have been better prepared and not get caught giving birth in a barn. But the second coming of Christ is even less predictable. And so Jesus says that we must be ready all the time, with expectation, with clothes laid out in readiness, with hearts full of hope, like children waiting for Christmas to come, like a woman expecting a baby, like children waiting for Christmas. For many of us, the second coming has been wrapped in such frightening imagery that we have stopped talking about it, especially in main-like churches like ours. But we cannot escape it entirely, can we? For example, every time we celebrate communion, which we will do in a few moments, in the great Thanksgiving, we are asked and invited to confess what the liturgy calls the mystery of our faith, that Christ is born, Christ is risen. Christ will come again. We say that every time. And then, when Advent comes along on this first Sunday of Advent, the lectionary does us the favor of making us look at these passages about the end that otherwise we might want to just say, let's focus more on that little baby in the manger. This morning's gospel lesson is a good example of the first Sunday of Advent texts every year. For as the days of Noah were, Jesus warned, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day Noah entered the ark, and they knew nothing until the flood came and swept them all away. So too will be the coming of the Son of Man. Then two will be in the field, one will be taken and one will be left. Two women will be grinding meal together, one will be taken and one will be left. Keep awake, therefore, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. But understand this: if the owner of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and would not have let his house be broken into. Therefore, you also must be ready. For the Son of Man is coming at an unexpected hour. Ready or not? Ready or not, Jesus is coming. If you read that passage and you read some of the stuff that Jesus talks about before in chapter 24, it is a little frightening, isn't it? And yet the early Christians who were suffering persecution and were powerless to stop that persecution embraced the time of the return of Christ with great hope, and they prayed earnestly for the second coming to take place in their time, and they fully expected that it would. They even came up with a special word that they used in their prayers. How many of you have ever heard the word Maranatha? That just simply means come, Lord Jesus. Or it can also be translated as Jesus or the Lord is coming. And they prayed that prayer earnestly. Maranatha, Lord, come. So here's the question. If Jesus were to come, and certainly just as the early church felt like this was a good time for them to experience the coming of the Lord, to set everything right, we live in a world where many of us look around and we say, wouldn't this be a good time for Jesus to come and set everything right? But whenever it happens, would we be ready? Because if Jesus is right, His coming will be like Christmas in that other world we were talking about before. Not on any given day, but simply when God, in God's wisdom, determines that the time is right. And when that time comes, we wouldn't want to be caught sleeping, would we? We would want to be wide awake. We would want to be looking out our bedroom window, ready to shout at the first sight of a snowflake. So as you do over these next few weeks, whatever it is that you and your family do to get ready for Christmas, as you do whatever has been your custom to do to get ready in all those ways that you usually do to be ready for that celebration that we know will take place on December 25th. Don't forget to get ready for that other celebration that will come, not on our schedule, but like the first flakes of snow. Maranatha, the Lord is coming. Ready or not, here he comes. Amen. Amen. Let's stand and sing